We cannot, under any circumstances, allow the Zionist regime or America to exploit the current situation to repeat their aggressions daily, expand their scope, and then simply claim that they remain committed to a ceasefire.
Iran says Washington's maritime blockade is not containing the crisis, but instead driving the region closer to a wider conflict. Iranian officials allege that CENTCOM-Israel acting in close coordination as tensions continue to escalate across the region. Tehran warned that repeated military actions and pressure tactics could undermine any remaining prospects for a lasting ceasefire. Iran issued a stark warning that continued U.S. support for Israeli military operations could carry serious regional consequences. As accusations fly over recent Israeli strikes, Iran says its armed forces remain on high alert and ready to respond to any new escalation. Regional tensions surged after U.S. forces disabled an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman on June 8, marking the latest flashpoint in the standoff with Iran. According to CENTCOM, the vessel was attempting to sail toward an Iranian port in violation of the ongoing U.S. maritime blockade.
U.S. Central Command statement read, and I quote,
U.S. forces disabled an unladen oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, June 8, after the vessel violated the ongoing blockade against Iran by attempting to sail to an Iranian port. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, disabled Palau-flagged MT Marivex as it transited international waters in the Gulf of Oman toward Iran. An FA-18 Super Hornet from USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, fired a precision munition into the ship's engineering and steering spaces after the crew failed to comply with directions from U.S. forces. Marivex is no longer sailing to Iran. CENTCOM forces have disabled 7 non-compliant vessels, redirected 134 ships that complied and allowed 42 vessels supporting humanitarian aid to pass since initiating the blockade on April 13. Unquote. Washington said the operation was part of a broader effort to enforce restrictions on Iran and prevent violations of the blockade. Tehran, however, accused the United States of fueling tensions and pushing the region toward a dangerous new escalation. CENTCOM says 7 vessels have been disabled since the maritime blockade against Iran was launched on April 13. U.S. officials claim more than 130 ships have altered course and complied with instructions issued by American forces. Washington maintains that humanitarian shipments continue to transit the region despite the ongoing blockade. The blockade remains a key pillar of Washington's strategy to increase economic and maritime pressure on Iran. Iran's Foreign Ministry accused Washington of being directly involved in and coordinating recent Israeli military operations in the region. Tehran alleged that U.S. Central Command has been supporting Israel in both defensive and offensive operations during the latest escalation. Iranian officials warned that the United States would be held responsible for the consequences of any further escalation or provocations in the region.
We cannot, under any circumstances, allow the Zionist regime or America to exploit the current situation to repeat their aggressions daily, expand their scope, and then simply claim that they remain committed to a ceasefire they are continuously and repeatedly violating. Therefore, our armed forces, our diplomatic apparatus, and all pillars of the Iranian nation and the Islamic Republic are fully prepared to face any situation in order to safeguard our national security and interests. Naturally, the diplomatic process that was initiated to end an imposed war, what was the philosophy of the negotiations from the beginning? The philosophy was to end the war imposed by the U.S. and the Zionist regime against Iran. It had been explicitly stated from the start, and the Pakistani mediator repeatedly emphasized that ending the war in Lebanon is part of the ceasefire. Well, if the very reason for these negotiations is undermined in any way by the Zionist regime or by any of the parties involved, namely the U.S. or Israel, then the diplomatic process will also be affected. Firstly, in our region, no one believes that the Zionist regime takes any action without prior coordination and cooperation with the United States. Also, we must not overlook the fact that the U.S. Department of State has explicitly cited protection of the Zionist regime as the primary reason for imposing this war against Iran. That has been the official U.S. position. Third, even now, despite claims by U.S. officials, we are aware that CENTCOM remains fully coordinated and cooperative with the Zionist regime, both defensively and offensively. The assertions by U.S. officials that they were unaware of the Zionist regime's actions regarding the attack on Lebanon further indicate that these officials believe, and continue to believe, that a ceasefire in Lebanon was part of the April 8 ceasefire understanding. This also raises a suspicion that either the Zionist regime is deceiving the United States, or there exists a kind of division of labor between the two. Experience shows that the latter option is far closer to reality in many cases. This is not the first time the Zionist regime has carried out a disruptive and destructive act precisely when it perceives that a process has taken a positive turn. At the highest levels, Americans have admitted, both before and after negotiations, that they kept Zionist regime officials informed of developments and acted in full coordination with them. Yet now we hear that American officials were exposed to the intelligence and security activities of the Zionist regime. This in itself is further evidence that the Zionist regime has no faith in any diplomatic process that could lead to even the slightest calm in our region. We are determined to restore relations with regional countries. The policy of good neighborliness with all countries in the region remains a consistent and unwavering policy.
Iran has announced a halt to its offensive military operations, but warned that any new attacks could trigger a far more severe response. Iran's Joint Military Command says it has stopped active operations against Israel following its latest round of retaliatory strikes. The fragile Middle East truce is facing renewed strain after a fresh exchange of fire raised fears of further escalation. Israel and Iran exchanged fire early Monday despite the existing ceasefire, marking their first direct military confrontation since the truce was reached.
Khatam al-Anbiya's central headquarters announced, following the acts of aggression and hostility carried out by the bloodthirsty Zionist regime in southern Lebanon and the Dahia area, with the support of criminal America, the powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran delivered a painful response to this regime in support of the oppressed people of Lebanon, a response from which the illegitimate Zionist regime and its supporters should have learned a lesson. Accordingly, the cessation of operations by the armed forces is hereby announced. However, it is emphasized that should the aggression and hostile acts continue, including in southern Lebanon, much more severe and crushing measures than before will follow.
Offensive operations may be halted for now, but Tehran has made it clear that all military options remain on the table if tensions escalate further. Iran has issued a stark warning to Israel, saying that any future aggression could trigger a far stronger response than before. "We will never bow to our enemies," Iranian officials declared, while warning that more severe action could follow if attacks continue. According to Tehran, that warning applies not only to Israel but also to any country supporting Israeli military actions in the region.
As we had promised, we acted accordingly. The powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran, have demonstrated that, while maintaining the highest level of defensive and offensive readiness, they act upon their stated commitments with speed and precision and make their American and Zionist enemies regret their actions. Criminal America and the brutal Zionist regime must know that a strong and proud Iran, together with the resistance forces that have brought honor to the region, will stand firm under all circumstances and against any threat, and will never bow their heads to the enemies that have been defeated in war. And should aggression and hostile acts continue, they will be met with an even stronger response.